This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 676, Educational Leadership Right Now with Dr. Joe Sanfelippo. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the cool cat teacher, Vicki Davis. For many educators, being in leadership during this time is extremely difficult. You may be feeling burned out or undervalued. But Vicki's guest today, Dr. Joe Sanfelippo, explains just how important teachers are, especially now, and that we shouldn't underestimate that importance. Check this out.
We say things like, well, I'm just a teacher, I'm only a teacher, I'm only. When we do that, when you say that you're just, when you say that you're only, you devalue all of your work. And not only do you devalue your work, but you give the person that you're talking to license to do exactly the same.
That's just some of the motivation you'll hear today. Joe is the superintendent of the Fall Creek School District in Fall Creek, Wisconsin. He is a distinguished author and award-winning educator and has attended the White House for his national level distinctions. He's here to motivate you today. So let's get started.
So today, let's talk about leadership with Dr. Joe Sanfelippo, Superintendent of the Fall Creek School District in Fall Creek, Wisconsin. So, Joe, as you prepare to, quote, get out of school, whatever it is we're doing right now to finish, and you look to the summer, what does leadership look right now in your school district, and what should superintendents and leaders be looking at across the country and the world as we prepare for the fall?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the cool things that are happening here in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, home of the Crickets, Vicki, home of the Crickets. Now, this is where we're at. So we're having as good time as we can in the current situation that we're in. And I think the thing that I want people in our district to know and understand, when it comes to leadership across the board is how do we make sure that we continue to make connections with kids when they're not here? And what are we going to do moving forward to continue those connections so when they come back, we're ready for them from an emotional standpoint and obviously from an academic standpoint, but how are we making sure that we're meeting their needs from an emotional standpoint? And, since we've started this whole process, the leadership lens that we always take a look at is how are we making sure that all of our leaders in our building are doing the right things to make sure that they connect with kids in the right way. And so when we got out of the situation, when everybody was sent home, we made sure that the power was in the connection. And we told all of our staff, keep away from the academic pieces for the first couple days. Make sure that we just want everybody gets a call home for the kid and for the people who are taking care of kids. And we ask two questions to make sure that they're connected. The first question is, how are you doing? And the second question is there anything that you need? How are you doing? And is there anything that you need? And as we move back from the summer back to get into the school or whatever it's going to look like, I would hope that we keep the same two questions at the heart and the core of what we do, because those two questions have really allowed us to lean into parents and lean into families and say, we're here for you. This is what we're here for, right? There's never been a better opportunity for us to prove to parents that we love kids and like content. There's never been a better opportunity for us to prove that to people. And so when we come back, I hope that we keep that at the core of our decision-making process.
Well, Joe, you're connected across the country, and face it, some superintendents threw in the towel and said, we can't reach everybody, so we're going to reach nobody. And whether they like it or not, that set a culture standard that they have to turn it around. I mean, what do we do? Because truthfully, if some places are in distance or have to go distance quickly, there are those who can't connect. So what do we do about that?
I think that the first thing that we have to do is find a way to connect. I mean, if we can't get to them, if they have no access from an internet standpoint, do they have a phone that we can get to? Are we going to drive out and have a conversation with the kid about where they're at and what we can do to help them? But I think the extra that we put into this is, minimal compared to what we're going to get out of it. If we think about the fact that schools and communities are partnerships, if we keep that in mind, that schools and communities are partnerships, then partnerships aren't something that happen just when you feel like it's okay for them to happen, right? Partnerships aren't just there when it's convenient for them to happen, right? These are true partnerships. So how are we reaching out to not only to the families that need the help, but also to the community organizations that can help these families if we can't get to them? Because everybody's connected to somebody. I will tell you this, that two things bubbled to the surface right away when this pandemic hit. The first one was, how well do we know our kids? And the second one was, what are we willing to do for them when they're gone? And if we think about those two things, how well do we know our kids? That's not only how well do we know them from face-to-face standpoint, but how well do we know who they're connected to and who we can get to? And when it comes to what are we willing to do for them when they're not here, what organizations are we willing to connect with, to reach out with, to drive to the house, to make the call, to whatever, to make sure that these kids and families have what they need to just feel safe. And they feel safe and feel connected, they're going to do great things.
We've talked a lot about have and have nots, those who have internet access and those who have not. But I think it's also those who have a school district with leaders who overcome, and those who have a school district that may not have either as strong leaders or they have really strong lawyers and the leaders aren't as strong. I don't know what you want to say, but the have and have nots, it's apparent. And we've got to all get back to school, right? I mean, so what do you say to people in districts where they don't have a Joe Sanfelippo as their superintendent, or whatever happened that they couldn't do it? They had, something bad happen and everybody pulled the plug. What do we say to those who have to turn a ship?
The first thing that we have to say to them is do your job as well as you can do your job. The accountability is bred from making sure that you're competent in your current role. Visibility, breeds credibility, like it or not. You don't have to love that, but I mean, visibility does breed credibility. So how are we making sure that we're visible, not only from a connection standpoint, but how are we showing people that we're connected to it and creating some momentum for the work that we're doing? One of the things we talk a lot about here is something that has nothing to do from a high-level leadership standpoint. It's how do we recognize, acknowledge, and extend the work of our colleagues? So how do we make sure that when we're working, we recognize the greatness that's around us with our colleagues? And then when we're in the right mindset to recognize that, how do we acknowledge it to that person that they're doing great things? And then finally, how do you extend that to somebody who wasn't there so they know that great things are happening with your colleagues? And if you're always looking at it through that mindset where you recognize, acknowledge, and extend, then the great stories are going to be told over and over again, which creates momentum. And that's not a high-level leadership's need, right? Like somebody at the top of this scale doesn't need to be there to lead that part of it. You can always recognize, acknowledge, and extend the great work of your colleagues. And that breeds accountability and credibility in that space.
It does. And we've had No Zoom Wednesdays where we've done PD and we've had, mentor leaders and department leaders. And we had our last full staff meeting on Monday, and we do this funny thing called Superlatives, right? We gave them to the seniors. We had an assembly, and it's just the crazy stuff. With the kids, it was like most likely to show up to Zoom under a blanket, most likely to make your bed during class. Right. It was just funny stuff. But we did it with the faculty, and, it felt good to laugh. I mean, where does just being human fit into this too?
Yeah. Oh, I hope it's where it starts. I really do, because I think we lose it. The biggest problem that I had with this whole process, and I told people, was don't worry about it until it feels normal. And when it feels normal, we got to worry. If it still feels like this isn't right, then you're okay. But the minute that it starts to feel like, oh, yeah, I guess this is what it is, now that's a problem. We want to make sure that we understand that there's a next level to what this is going to look like. And we've told our families too. The first thing we told our families is this is not ideal. This is not ideal. Ideal is your kids in our building with our teachers and their peers learning collectively together in this spot. That's ideal. This is not ideal. We're going to do the best that we can, but this is not ideal. And we did that intentionally because we wanted to make sure that parents and family members knew that ideal is with our people all the time. That's ideal, right? So we wanted to make sure that people knew and understand what that looked like. The other thing that we've been really trying to put out there is making sure that families know and understand that this is not a time for us to say, see, we told you. It's really hard to teach. This is really, really hard. This is a time where we lean into those conversations and say, you did not ask for this. This is not what you asked for. This is not what you wanted. But we are here to help you because that is our job. Our job is to help. And if we can kind of keep coming back to those things, I think we're going to develop some momentum, hopefully.
Awesome. And I love what you said earlier about partnership. That's one thing we have in our school's mission statement, that we partner with parents. And we said, we've never partnered quite as much as we are even now. So as we finish up, Joe, why don't you give a pep talk to the educators out there, both the superintendents and principals as well as the teachers? Because the truth is we're exhausted, but we've got a pretty busy. I don't know what summer is going to be because it's so much work to figure out. I've got 6 different scenarios we're working on planning. It's a lot, so give us a pep talk. I need it too.
I don't know. The thing that I will tell you is that there has never, ever been a time where the impact of the teacher has been more evident with families and with communities and with kids. I mean, if you did not know your value to this point, you most certainly know your value today. A lot of times that we get into this mix where we devalue our work, right? Like we say things like, well, I'm just a teacher. I'm only a teacher. I'm only. When we do that, when you say that you're just, when you say that you're only, you devalue all of your work. And not only do you devalue your work, but you give the person that you're talking to license to do exactly the same. Because why would they change the way that they talk about us if we're not going to change the way that we talk about us? Take value, take pride in the fact that you change the lives of kids if they're in front of you or if they're at home and you're on a Zoom call with them under a blanket or wherever they're at, right? You create value for these families, and you should be proud of the work that you do because of the value that you create in those spots.
Oh, Joe, thank you for coming on. I knew you would be motivational and encouraging for all the educators out there. Educators, I hope you'll continue to talk on Twitter about these conversations because we do need to encourage each other. There will be a new normal at some point. We're not there yet. This has been a challenging time. And Joe, thank you for your leadership.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me, and we really appreciate the opportunity. Go Crickets!
If you enjoyed today's 10-Minute Teacher podcast, subscribe on iTunes. You can also catch up with Vicki on Twitter at CoolCatTeacher or level up and learn with her blogs and free resources at CoolCatTeacher.com. Thanks for listening.